Well, a very good evening to you, and welcome to this program of Walter Rodney Groundings. I want to express my happiness at being with you again this week to discuss current events within the political and social landscape of Guyana. And of course, with me to continue our discussion from last week is Brother Tacuma Ogunseye, and so I want to welcome him again to Walter Rodney Groundings and express my happiness that you, the viewers out there, are with us again. Welcome, Brother Takum.
It is always a pleasure to join you so that we could have a discourse with our viewers and our supporters and the country at large.
All right, so last week we spoke about a number of things, including you expressed your views on the Carter Center. I noticed that the media is still playing up to the whole idea of having the Carter Center come and so on. But you did express some views. What was the response? You seem to have had some response to the views you shared. What have people been saying?
Well, I mean, basically, a number of our supporters have been raising it with me. Why is it I'm saying that the Carter Center should not have been barred?
Okay.
I mean, which means that people are paying attention to these discussions, and I think it's a good thing, that people are keenly paying attention to these matters, and we had the president reiterating his position, the president of the government, um, and then you had subsequent commentators. I think Nigel Hughes, and you had um, whichever his name is slipping me. We used to be the PNC reform Ming Stanley Ming.
Yeah,
I think they do, I think a benchmark program or some program, and they also express their views, and they express, you know, their views more concur with the president's views than they concur with my views. But I think that there are two fundamental issues. I am not saying that the government does, as a sovereign state, that the government have a right to decide who they want to invite or who they want to come into the country at this period, whether it's to observe the elections or whether it relates to COVID-19. I think that falls on the right to the government. Okay, but my concern was the politics of it. Okay, because we're in a political engagement, we're in a political engagement, and a political engagement is not a question of whether you like, you know, this person or you don't like this person. You have to factor into it some objective political objectives, and any political decision, in my mind, has to be weighed against the gains and the losses. You you have to ask yourself, if I take a particular political action, would it be positive? It will lead to more positive developments on my side or negative developments. In this case, the action, if I take action against Carter Center, okay, would it be helping the PPP or helping me, the APMU AFC? I think that is the way you have to approach it, and then you come down wherever you want to come down. And my argument last week, and I will maintain it, is that we're in a battle where the PPP has got the better of us. They have more allies in this equation at present than we have. And when you're confronted with such a situation, where the two involving the two major US parties, Carter Center, as I argue, is associated with the Democratic Party. The International Republican Institute, that was here giving advice to the Election Commission on technical matters, are close to the Republican Party. You have a Republican government in power. Okay? Now, my assessment of the American politics at this present moment as it relates to Guyana is driven more in terms of the elections in November, Trump elections. And I think that in their strategic considerations, they have a place for Guyana. And my suspicion is that they want to use Guyanese territory in any invasion of Venezuela. So I'm operating from that premise. Therefore, for me, the Democratic Party must by now know that they have to undermine anything Trump do that will give them an advantage against them. And I would have played upon that possible contradiction. And I would have said, look, Carter Center, you could come, but the Republican Institute, you finish your job. You was to advise the election is over. I would divide them. If Carter Center decide, well, I am coming because if you let the Republican Institute come and I am coming, so be it. You see, but I would not take a decision that put both of the major U.S. parties in the PPP camp and against me. I don't see we have nothing to gain from that. And when I ask myself, what is it that the Carter Center would say at the end of a process that the Organization of American States, which is more hostile to us than the Carter Center, would not see? And when I look at this process, there's only three possible outcomes for any observers. You either say the APMU AFC won, or you say the PPP win, or you say that the thing was so messy that you really can't call a win. There's only three possible outcomes, okay? And therefore, I don't see the Carter Center omission, okay, affecting that. And if they were presidents, I don't see them, they have to come down within those three dimensions. So for me, I don't see any advantage we gain by not allowing them to come. But I think it gives the PPP, okay, more things to beat us with, and it strengthens the international alliance against us. So that was really my concern. I mean, it's a very complicated analysis that ordinary supporters doesn't easily buy into, too much of complex analysis. But I think that is the way political leadership should look at the equation. But what is important, the government have made the decision. They have stated two things. They stated that CARICOM is the best, okay, to deal with the situation in Guyana, and they stated COVID-19. You can't have it both ways. You have stated a political position, and you have stated a position that's relative to the virus. So you state your political position. My only problem is that if that's your position, state it up early front and close the matter. But eventually they have said it, and I guess the matter is closed.
The position, okay, your position, I quite understand. But the people who seem to be against what you were saying are holding on more to a nationalistic kind of position that, well, look, we are an independent country. We don't want people to dictate to us any longer, that we can manage our own affairs. How does that juxtapose with the position that you have taken?
Yeah, we're an independent personal country, but we're taking foreign people money, aid. I see the US give aid for COVID. We're taking it. You see, you can't take people's money in this international arrangement and then impose 100% sovereignty. In the modern world, there's no country got 100% control of its sovereignty. The very fact I got international treaties reduce that, but I understand the point. But in a divided country, we as APMU, okay, doesn't represent the whole country, represent half of the country, PP represent half of the country. So you have a situation where half saying bring Carter and half saying don't bring the Carter Center. So I'm saying that the nationalism, if you argue the nationalism point, you got to argue that you only speak for half of the country. You don't speak for the whole country on this matter, because the other half of the country is saying something different. So you can't have it both ways. You see? So, I understand the argument, but to be real in politics, we don't have a united national position. You see?
All right, so, well, would you say that the response would have been based upon the perceived, you were saying that now we have placed basically the Republicans and the Democrats against us, but do you get a sense that the decision might have come from the perception that the way the international observer team plus the locals and so on, that way they behave during the Council Region 4 that the feeling is that they all have already been part of the PPP's agenda to
Yes,
change the
that, I
regime.
mean, I can understand influence you, but remember you're in an unfolding situation. You're in an unfolding situation. You know, the war is still being fought, and you still have to, divide your adversaries against you. You still have to make sure you create the best possible situation for the outcome that you want. You understand? So even though, yes, they have demonstrated a bias, okay, but you got to be careful and technical because even though they demonstrate a bias, they haven't said you rigged the elections. They said that attempts were being made in Region 4 to rig the elections. So there's some space there. They haven't said they haven't said the PPP win. They said from their observation, they're convinced that attempts were being made to rig the elections. That's different from saying you rig the election because we didn't reach an outcome. No, you have to take note of all of those dimensions in the equation because it may become important. And in terms of Carter Center have said in relation to these elections that we need shared governance as a solution. No, that is an important statement for the APMU constituents. And you have to, in a bad situation, you have to save as much of the goodies you could save. You see? And I feel that, I would have been more comfortable with tying care to them to the commitment to share government, fight, to help building share governance. You see, you may not be able to get everything from everybody. And when you're in a bad situation, you have to look what is the positives I could get out of this thing. The Arabs, the Palestinians have a good way of doing it. Every time they get defeated by the Israelis, they find a way to turn defeat into victory. It's a political craft that you have to develop. That even when you're in a bad situation, how to translate, how to use a bad situation to get something positive out for you. You won't get everything you want, but.
All right, well, the decision has been made,
Yeah.
and I don't see that being changed.
No, I don't think so. I think we've passed that stage.
Yeah,
We have to move on.
I don't see us backpedaling on the position that we've taken. But before we continue with our political discourse, the government has given consent for the body of the trade unionist Kubal Chan to be brought back to Guyana. What are your views in
I'm happy because I was a bit getting worried, over the kind of controversy that was developing, and I felt it was an unnecessary controversy that we shouldn't get stuck into that kind of unnecessary thing. So I was happy when I heard that the government, have approved, and the comrade body will be returned to Guyana, and I think it's good because we got to be careful. We can't, as much as we may have a tense and a competitive political engagement, we can be very petty, and especially when you exercise state power. You can't be too petty. And I was worried at one time that we were allowing the narrative to be spinned that for some reason we were not cooperating to get the body back. So I was happy when it became extremely clear that the government is committed to bringing back the body, and the COVID board, body have approved of it. And I think it's a good thing. Comrade need to be brought home, and need to be given a decent burial, in the context of the COVID.
All right. Well, I'm happy that that situation has also been resolved. We also have a number of Guyanese who are stranded, both in North America and in the Caribbean, and they too have been given the go-ahead. The government has opened the door for them to come, but of course within certain conditions that have to be in keeping with our current situation. And we still seem to be having problems with the COVID situation because our numbers keep going up. And if you look at per head, the number of persons in in relation to our population, then there should be concern for our figures. We're still hoping that people who are not listening, would adhere. I noticed that George Chung is pretty busy now. That we seem to be getting back to normalcy in terms of our operations in the city and so on. But even if you are doing that, then observe the social distancing and wearing your mask and so on. And the problems of the mask seem to be one, because you're getting different views in relation to wearing masks. I know there have been situations in some parts where children wearing masks and exercising, running and so on fell and died and so on. So
In Guyana?
not in Guyana, right? In China and other
Mm.
parts of the world. So they're saying that the mask sometimes restricts
Breathing.
breathing, the flow of oxygen to the body, and so you wear it under condition. Don't use it when you're exercising and so on. Even if you're driving alone, you don't have need for putting on a
Mhm.
mask. So you need it, use it in crowded locations, and so. But I also want to warn people about the flood of information about all these cures and all these things that a lot of people are. The internet is flooded with all kinds of stuff about how to treat the disease and so on. But except for Madagascar, where I think they said that they have found some kind of cure, which the WHO has refused to accept, because we're talking about business here, big business, the international pharmacies, and those that control them don't want to
Mhm.
give credence to anything that is not going to put money in their
In their
pockets. So I think the last thing I heard is that they have in Madagascar, they've opted to relinquish their ties with the WHO
Okay.
in relation to that. But whatever works, we got to accept.
Yeah.
Even Cuba at one point did say that they have some kind of effective way of dealing with there. But the international pharmaceutical industry has kept the world in a bind as far as vaccination and all of these things are concerned, and so they always want to be on top. A particularly striking case would have been one Dr. Sidi,
Mhm.
who was treating HIV and AIDS and had proven results in terms of cures. And they basically assassinated him, jailed him for no particular reason, and then he was found dead in his jail cell. And then there was this other celebrity who was doing uh, researching Dr. Sidi's death, and he too died mysteriously. So
Where big money is involved, all kinds of things that are possible.
but still be careful about.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'm very concerned with Brazil, what's happening in Brazil,
Yeah,
because
that-
Brazil's situation is getting out of hand. They will have over 200 plus thousand infected people, and
the death rate
and
is-
20 to 21 thousand died,
Mhm.
and that's very close to border. And normally in these matters, if your bordering country get out of
It's-
hand,
yeah,
you too will become a victim. That's my main concern right now, that we definitely got to try to restrict the movements in those areas.
Yeah, well, and I know Region 7, now they're saying Region 7 is affected, and so pay attention and be serious about it, and take all the necessary precautions so that we do not end up having a spiral of the spread of the disease. So let's go back to our political arena. The count is on, and every day we're getting new developments. The most recent is the threat by the PPP against GCOM and against those who are observing the process, representing the different political parties. The PPP has threatened to take people to court and to have them sanctioned for calling the names of or pointing out the names of people who are presumably dead and who were presumably overseas during the time, the day of elections. This threat against the process, and now they are saying that GCOM doesn't have the mandate to that far-reaching mandate in relation to dealing with the count as they see it. What is your take on their response? Because every day they're coming with something new that is seeking to derail the direction of GCOM in terms of getting clarity as to elections being free, fair, transparent, and all of that.
I don't take the threats seriously, because they only could carry, they could carry GCOM to court for the court rule on some things. They may be able to identify one or two GCOM officers, because to carry institution to court, you got to carry through the officers. But for the ordinary GCOM workers, and so I don't think it's a matter, and I don't think that they could automatically decide who will get sanctions or who will not get sanctions. So I don't take that part serious. I think the latter is more important, that their position is that GCOM doesn't have the right, the legal right, to deal with the anomalies and the irregularities that are coming up, and and they're opposed to the case that the APMU AFC is making, that this process is not simply a process to just check on numbers, right? This is a process to look at the whole process to determine credibility. And I think that is important, because the international community have been calling for credible elections and credible results. So I can't see how you could establish credibility unless you have a kind of holistic approach to the election process. But the PPP obviously will continue to do what they're doing, because they're only interested in one thing. They want a process that is likely to declare them winners. The process that we're pressing for, of credibility, if GCOM accept it and we could provide the necessary evidence, it means that there will be a deduction in the votes that the PPP claim that they have, and get them closer to defeat. So they're not anxious to support any process that will affect their numbers and to bring the elections closer and closer to the defeat. So we have two different approach to this recount. And I think that our side is correct. We just don't want to know a simple recount, because we are operating on the premise that, look, you did rigging in the regions and on the ground. And to the extent that you did rigging, you interfere with the electoral process. And we want that to count, to matter. You see? The PPP take the opposite position. And I don't think that no side will give in on that. It's not going to fall on GCOM to decide where GCOM will come down. And since GCOM will be divided on a partisan basis, it is the chair who will be left to bail the cat, unfortunately. But that is the reality.
But the last thing I've heard is that the chairman has written to the APNU requesting, evidence of the claims that they have made, and that too has riled the PPP.
Yeah, because it's the same thing. In fact, once they interpret the fact that she asks for evidence, means that she have signaled a willingness to accept the argument that we're doing, a more systematic process rather than just simple counting, you know.
But you know, what I continue to, because we have to continue to highlight the fact that the PPP's focus on Mingo. Every time you flash, it's more evidence of Mingo's irregularities. And when you check for Region 1, you would have found that the PPP's number of votes would have been decreased by somewhere in the vicinity of 2,000. The APNU's votes would have gone up. There are other instances in other regions where there is clear evidence of manipulation of numbers and so on. So, what is it about Region 4? And why should we ignore all of the other discrepancies that would have been committed in other regions and simply deal with Mingo as the, whipping boy for these elections?
Well, the people will argue their case, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Their case is based on exposing what they allege is wrongdoing by Mingo. And they're not going to stop doing that. That is their road to victory. Our road to victory is what we do. We have to expose the irregularities and the fraud and to pressure GCOM to accept that so that could count on our side. And we can't change that. Therefore, we shouldn't expect that they're going to come out and go back. I mean, that's the reality of the situation.
8,000 votes. Yeah, it is alleged that 8,000 votes by the joint services, that these were not stamped, which would have made the ballots illegal in a sense, and that they were not counted.
Well, I don't know whether that is accurate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've saw the 8,000 figure, but if I read it right, they're saying that 8,000 is the probable figure for the joint service vote. But whether it is 8,000 that didn't have the stamp, I don't know. But if we were to be hypothetical and say, oh, look, the 8,000, all of them weren't stamped and all of them weren't counted, we know that the joint services, most of them will vote for the APMU, AFC. So you will say at least out of the 8,000, probably the APMU got 6. Mm-hmm. And if that is so, you will knock off on the PPP 17, 6 will carry down to 11. but I don't know whether it is the 8,000 or it is a part of that 8,000. But see that those are important things that we have to try to get the GCOM to concede, because that is the way you'll be knocking down the alleged numbers that the PPP claim that they are in front by. So that is very important. You know,
because they have been readjusting their margin of victory as they come.
As the come goes.
Yeah.
And we got to get them into the danger zone. You see, historically, all the elections here, the PPP always start in front. They always run away from us because they're stronger in a lot of the regions, given the demographics and so. But when it comes to Region 4, and so this is where we overtake them. You see? This is where we overtake them. So they know that the elections always is being decided by Region 4, which got the largest amount of, single large amount of voters, 40% of the voters. And there's the APMU stronghold. And they know that there's no question of beating us in Region 4. Okay? So they don't know that that's going to give us, significant numbers. But in this election, they're claiming that Region 4 didn't give us enough numbers to overtake them. But this is what we want the process to determine. All right? This is what we want the process to determine. And obviously, they doesn't want the process to determine that. Mm-hmm. So the more we could chip away upon their numbers, as we close in the Region 4 count, they will find themselves in a funny position. I think they begin to sense that. But I can't say exactly how it will finally play out, because it depends upon how GCOM rule about these anomalies and these irregularities, and whether they will find a way of addressing it, given the division in the commission.
But at a press conference that Anil Nandalal had at the media center outside the conference center there, he seems to be suggesting that you look at margin of errors in relation to the elections, and the discrepancies, margin of errors, how well does that fit in with credibility, the elections being credible and not credible?
I think what he's batting on, there is this, I don't want to call it a convention, that might be too strong a word, but there is this quote unquote accepted view that no elections is 100% perfect. And so you start with that you're not going to get no perfect elections. Therefore, when problems turn up, which you expect will turn up, the question is whether the irregularities are sufficient enough to change the logic of the vote. Put it so that people can understand in midterm. The PVP say that they're in front by 17,000. Let me just accept that. That's what we're dealing with. Now, if we prove irregularities that amongst the 6,000, the PP still got the 1,000 in the bag. And internationally, they will say the elections, the irregularities wasn't sufficient to change the logic of the vote. I think this one Nadal is trying to invoke. You know, that yes, you got irregularities, but you got to prove that it's sufficient enough to change the logic. So we got to get enough, to show that,
But what if there is outright evidence of attempts, as they're claiming that Mingo, and now I'm seeing they're trying to include Minister Lawrence, and that, well, they're planning to take them to court and all of that. If there is evidence that there was a deliberate attempt to alter the outcome of the elections by the PPP, as they're claiming the APNU did, how does that factor into this whole idea of margin of errors that you're talking about?
Well, I mean, I'm convinced that both sides will come out here, with a cloud over their head. Okay? But it is how the Elections Commission deal with these matters. It's not so much how I feel. It's how the Election Commission deal with these matters. But if the Election Commission comes to a decision that they're not certain what the outcome is, I think it will eventually have to be resolved through some political negotiations. I don't think the question about marginal error, I don't think will matters. Will matters.
But I get the sense that after the count, we're going to end back where we began.
Courts.
So, what brings an end to this?
I don't. Honestly, I don't know. But I'm thinking you're right. Because I'm almost certain we're gonna end up, regardless of what is the outcome, we're gonna end up back in the courts.
Okay. So
I think that's what eventually gonna happen. But there's a big but. There's a big but.
What's the but?
The but is if either the political leaders accept the results, I think it will notify all the court possible actions eventually. So that's a big but.
But one of the things that people are talking about is the fact that President Granger has come out explicitly. He is pellucid in his pronouncement that the APNU will accept the decisions of the recount and GCOM at the end of the process. All attempts to get that kind of commitment from the PPP have so far failed.
No, I don't think that's accurate. I think Jagdeo reluctantly agreed that he too will abide by the outcome of the account. I mean, it is hard for any leader having committed CARICOM and all what we know was involved. It's hard for you to say you're going to live by the outcome.
Okay.
Right? But if the outcome create a create justifications for your rejection, they will reject it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's so so I think you don't pass the hurdle. You know, I think if the outcome is that definitive, I think each side will accept it. But if the outcome is not that definitive, I think you might still have great problems, real concept problems.
Mhm. But one of my I'm still a bit, you know, um, confused in terms of the whole idea of an elections petition, because supporters of the APNU, uh, some people who were expressing a legal opinion, were of the view that from the inception that the declarations that were made by the
CEO,
CEO,
um,
that
they will
those should
feel
have been carried, and that an elections petition should have been the result
mm,
for the PPP in dealing with the issues that they had. But you know, the chair acceded to the demands for, you know, a hearing and so on. But now the PPP is basically turning around, and they're saying that GCOM has the jurisdiction, that in the same vein, that any concerns and any discrepancies and all of these things, that any aggrieved party now should resort to an elections petition. How hypocritical is that a position to take?
well, I really don't know if you could call it hypocritical, to be honest. You know, in this battle, everybody going to bat in a way that is favorable to themselves. Our comrades who have argued that we Mingwood declaration for Region 4, which give us a victory, and Louis Field's submission to the commission is a legal process which basically the Constitution provides for, and to the extent that they have completed the process, then Gracie should be sworn in, and any other challenge should come to election petition. So our side is invoking the election petition as a way out if for the PPP. In the present recount scenario, we are saying we want all these anomalies and these irregularities be taken on board. PP is invoking that, look, swear we in.
Yeah.
We in, swear we in. Let it go to election commission, election petition. The fact of the matter is this. The history of Guyanese electoral politics, in as far as you go to the courts for elections and petition, no government have been changed through the election petition. So all sides know that once you get a government in place, the chances of the government being changed by election petition is very, very slim in Guyana.
Even if the challenge is upheld in the courts.
Well, I've got to pause here because our government have been more respecting of court orders. When the people found themselves where the courts notify, I think it was the 1979 elections, they swear in Janet and end the process. But I don't know whether our government will want to ignore the court. So I mean, I don't want to say they may very act the same way. But generally, people are conscious that, look, once the government is in place, the legal challenge could take long. Even if it results in a defeat, it might come 2.5 years from now, and we could enter into another elections. So nobody will really want to be forced down the road. You know, I think that is the difficulty you have. But as I tell you, our government have demonstrated more respect for the courts, and I can see that if they get a nod and they find themselves back in office and the court rule notify the elections, I can see that they will not adhere to the court ruling because that has not been the history. You know, they will fight as much as they fight, but once the legal process finish, I think they will honor it.
Right. What about the people who are calling for? Because there are people who are saying that, well, look, at the end of the day, if the elections are found to be not credible, that you scrap it. And you have new elections. Some people are not in that view. They're not holding to that position. They see it as some kind of attempt, again, at condoning rigging and all of these things. It seems as though once people have a particular perception or they hold a position that is associated or aligned to a particular party, that whatever the outcome, whatever the evidence that there is, that their position is not going to change, that they're going to find some way of justifying their, understanding or their feeling or their own, position in terms of support for the side that they're on, and they don't care about anything else. But how about the concept of new elections in the face of all of
Well, I think firstly you'll have to have a consensus between the two major parties that the elections have been sufficiently messed up for you to have new elections. And I think that is highly likely to happen. But you can't have you don't get new elections only with one side says. So the country they have to reach that point. If they don't reach that point, but then there's a more fundamental question that will have to face us. We know what elections again is, but elections again is an ethnic census. And other elections will be produce very much the same results. The question that is in confront us is the one that we discussed many weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Is whether as a nation we want to be true to ourselves and to accept that our condition, our ethnic and political interests doesn't allow us, to be ruled by the other side. And it is time for us to see that this constitution that we have, which is based upon a vertical system, it's time that we alter it, reform it, so that we have a power-sharing constitution. So at the end of the day, when we don't vote race, the constitution says you are going to send the same government and run the country. And I think that is the most fundamental thing. And new elections will produce basically the same contradictions, because that's the elections have been produced in Ghana since the 1950s. So I don't know what a new elections will do. So I might say that the big thing is to, if anything positive is to come out of the election crisis, regardless of who wins, it should lead to some shared governance solution so that we could turn a new page and we could really settle down as a country to deal with the challenges that the country is facing, both internally and externally. And I think that is the challenge that's facing the political leadership. And if my understanding this country is correct, if the parties tell the major leaders of the parties tell the constituents we're going for shared governance, the constituents will fall in line. They'll fall in, even though they may do it reluctantly, they will eventually fall in line. So it's a question of where the political leaderships on both sides stand in relationship to this problem and the future of the country.
But do you get a sense that the PPP, because they've already put up the argument that because of the claims, what they are calling spurious claims that are being made by the APNU in the recount, that Jack Dio is saying that, well, look, they see no way of aligning for any shared governance with a party that is, he's already putting up an argument to debunk or to simply set aside any idea of shared governance.
No, the PPP doesn't. Look, both parties have a kind of a whole loose position on shared governance, depending on whether they're in opposition, whether they're in government. This has been our reality. So there's no commitment from the PPP, and why I'm hard on the PPP, because they had 23 successive years to deal with this question of shared governance, and they never dealt with it. The APMU only had 5 years, and the APMU was in a funny situation because it's a coalition with 60-40, and what bring them to power is some votes coming from the Indian community, which the AFC probably brought. Okay? And in that situation, I guess the AFC have seen themselves as being the future leaders in the Indian community. And I will say, given the nature of the coalition, I could see how it was difficult for the coalition to genuinely embrace shared governance, because what it means is pushing the AFC aside and conceding, significantly to the PPP. And I could see the difficulties the APMU AFC just coming to power we had in that situation. But they had committed to constitutional reform. And I think that even if you didn't share government with the PPP for the period from 2015 to the end of the period, at least you should have complete constitutional reform to get share governance in the next elections. So this 2020 election should have been fought under a share governance formula. I don't think as a government we could be excused for that weakness. I could see us not being able to invite the PPP into our government soon after 2015 because of the problems you got with the AFC and so, and the fact that the PPP themselves have said they didn't interested. But this is politics. If I was the president in this situation, since I know you didn't interested, but I would invite them. Let them reject it. You see, in politics, but I think he couldn't do that because the AFC would have not have taken it nice. You see? So I'm saying that yes, there were more difficulties on the APMU AFC side, and we didn't have 23 years to deal with the problem. But the PPP had 23 uninterrupted years to address the problem, and they failed to address it. And I don't believe the PPP's interest in power sharing. So this is not a question whether interest. The question is whether the political logic, as it is, forced both sides to realize that the only way out is power sharing, or we slaughter one another. You see? So it's not whether you like it. The question is whether the present configuration of political and social forces in the country reach a point where if you don't, the consequences is great.
But do you get a sense that that interest is in there is that interest in the political leadership, particularly of the PPP?
Well, it is not a question of whether the interest in the political. The question is whether
looking at the what can result, the concern for many sober-minded Guyanese is what happens if this thing gets out of order. Are the politicians who are to make this decision, are they looking in the direction of, because some of them have made pronouncements that the country gonna go up in all these things, do they take outside their personal selves and their personal achievements the country as a whole, in their deliberations? And
no, you see, even if one say our politicians are self-serving, they interested in their personal interests, and the narrow interest is more important than the national interest on both sides. If we start from that position, what I am saying is that the present situation in the country has the potential to throw all of that out of the window. I'm going to go down dangerous ground because I know I was trying to avoid it, but I'm telling you. Now, you have a sitting government. You have a crisis, and if the crisis throw up a situation where you can't determine who's the winner, that government is not going to get up and say PP coming. Then the PP will decide how much pressure I am prepared to do to root the government out. So we're talking now about not rhetoric now, we're talking about flexing muscles. And once you begin to flex muscles in a racially divided society country, you don't know where to end. Now, it is that reality that each side will in the quiet moments, if we reach to that point, we have to decide, are we prepared to go down the road of slaughter? Or are we prepared to be civilized people and to say, despite what happened, we got to find a decent and civilized way out of the crisis? And I am betting, I don't believe in the faith of the leaders. I am betting that if the objective conditions is of that neither side could prevail without a major nasty situation, I think they will have no other choice but both sides to bite the bullet and to do what is best in the interest of the country. It's not a question whether they like it or not. Whether you're good, you like it, you want it or not. The question is what will be facing you. Could you survive in this line of action? You see? And that is what is matter. That's what will matter in this equation.
I'm looking at what has been happening around the world. I mean, you're painting a picture there which seems to suggest that, well, all right, the people will force them to make a decision. But I don't, that hasn't...
Not the people.
Uh-huh.
I'm saying that the logic of the political situation,
Okay.
if you got a sitting government who say, look, this election was so nasty, it can't, it can't have a credible, and I am moving.
Mm-hmm.
Our opposition got to decide how you get the government to move.
Right. Uh-huh.
Okay, and it means that you have to up the pressure on the government. You got to engage in all kinds of things, and actions got reactions and got consequences. So it boils down to it, what a price I want to pay to get back in power. The opposition got to ask, and the government got to ask itself, what price I want to pay to stay in power by myself. And I'm saying that if the reality of the situation is pointing to extreme price for both sides, there is where I am betting that they will do the right thing. It's like the Soviet Union and the United States. At the end of the World War, when the Americans threw those 2 hydrogen bombs upon Japan, Russia ain't had none. But as soon as Russia get, it's mutual destruction. So I could destroy you, you could destroy me, therefore we can't fight. It makes sense. Well, Guyana seems to be going the same path, where we could destroy each other.
Okay.
And we have to make the decision. And I think we'll be postponing it for many decades. This is what confronted me in the 50s, now it confronts me today. We have had a lot of years to reflect upon it. And I'm telling you, with oil, it's changed the whole equation. It is not the old contestation that we accustomed to. This here, the stakes is high for both sides. Whoever come out of power here can't get back in power in a hurry. So both sides got much space. You can't concede here and say, well, look, 5 years after now, I go win. No side, given the amount of money involved, the smallness of this country and the ability of our government to bribe with that kind of money and to do all kinds of things. So the stakes is high at the level of the political leadership. The stakes is high.
I have seen a lot of erratic ideas being touted on social media. I just pass them. I don't comment. I just look at these things. I noticed one guy who was supposed to be sane and supposed to be rational, making the point that, look, the PPP have won these elections. What are we waiting for? Why isn't there an invasion from the international forces? Do that kind of politics still obtain in this world?
No, but he doesn't understand international relations. International forces not going to invade no country just for the PPP. No. He's just...
This is supposed to be a...
No, but don't forget about the sovereignty of Guyanese. Even if they want to respect Guyana's sovereignty, they have to look at their own interests. Mm-hmm. And they will argue that they can't justify United Nations and around the world the need to invade some country Guyana on this matter. They will say, look, we got a lot of other leverage. We got sanctions and so. We got put a set of measures that will force them to bend. Invasion, I don't think invasion is on the cards. The Americans and them and the British and them and they combine, them feel Ghana is a small country. You oil money there in the bank. We got a lot of things to squeeze you. So I think that they will feel comfortable. Whatever is the objective they want in Guyana, they could achieve it without meeting.
Yeah, but it just seems as though the focus of these guys is get the PPP in power. So they're ignoring all of the other ramifications. What about sanctions? Some people are of the view. I mean, Kamla in Trinidad is calling for sanctions. The PPP calling for sanctions. There is this view that this call is an unpatriotic call, that because sanctions don't only affect, it affects everybody.
Yeah.
So how do you view that as a call being made by any of them?
I think no responsible politicians should want to invite sanctions from foreign big powers, on the country, and there's a narrow political interest because the people want to go back in power, and they doesn't mind if it leads back them to power. They don't care what price the country paid. It's very unpatriotic. You understand? It's unpatriotic. But sanctions in a country like Guyana, in a real way, okay, it's gonna affect all Guyanese, but it's gonna affect some of us more than it affects others. But at the end of the day, it is not in the interest of the country. It's not in the interest of the country. So I don't know why anybody would want to expose the country to sanctions, especially if you could find a way out, that is rooted in reconciliation and so forth and so forth. And I don't know you can't get sanctions because the international community in America, they can't impose sanctions until there's a conclusive end of the process. So people call for sanctions now because they think the people win. It's just hot air talking, just hot air. Sanctions will only become an issue at the end of the process. And if the process shows the PAP win, and we say we're moving, that's the only time sanctions could ever be considered. If we win, well, the question of sanctions is out. But we didn't get there yet.
Okay.
We didn't get there yet, and the supporters who calling for sanctions, it's a nice rhetoric, But even the Americans and them know very well that they can't act in such a way that morally can be justified. They have to have some clear justifications. So the election process is finished. So we accuse the AFC government. The AFC government is illegal. The president of the government is a legal government. It's a caretaker government. It's illegal constitutionally. The results haven't been finalized, so you can't say the government thieved the elections. The most you can say, I believe, was attempt was being made. Okay. But you can't say the thief the elections, so how you going to impose sanctions? You see? You yourself did already committed to seeing the outcome before you could talk about sanctions, But you see, the Americans, them were using sanctions as a way of putting pressure upon key officials in the system. You see? Because if you watch the pattern of how they use sanctions, the first a range of sanctions, if it were to come, it'll come to individuals. And if they didn't get what they desire, then they can move from individuals to disrupting the social and economic life of the country. Like, we like banks go through the American banks and so. You got the island money in the American bank and they say, well, you can't get it. You understand? And those kind of things will start put pressure on the economy and so. They will use the clout in the international community, and the IMF and in the World Bank to make sure you don't get no money to borrow and so, and they pile up the pressure. You're a country that depends upon American ships and Western ships to move your goods in the main. They will probably work to make sure that you can't access the shippings. So, but there's a process. That don't happen in one walk. There's a process. Because they can't justify it in one walk. There's a process.
Okay.
Right? But you see, they know that there may be Guyanese public officials who have personal bank accounts in the United States. And the threat of sanctions would mean that you know about the first thing people got cut off is access to your money.
Okay.
So for the Americans, shouting sanctions orally is to terrorize them who in the process. You see?
And of course, they're talking about taking away visas and all of these things. And so on.
Like me, I like if you candidate, they take away a visa. I really don't care. I ain't got no visa from America anyhow.
Well,
But you know what I mean. So, but those are the things that there. But for the sanctions regime affect the country, it will take a little time because they got to do it systematically.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, but anyway, we still have to wait on the count is still on. And I'm hopeful because there is the view that the chairman and the commission has been basically bending backwards to please the PPP. That every cry that the PPP makes, that they're eventually the commission gives in to it. And so we're hopeful that at some point, the strength of the commission could be restored. And that the people.
I mean, but I hear that, but I don't know if it's fair to the commission because I'm the chair. I think she has been trying to be even-handed. I mean, there's certain little things like the use of telephone. People say they want it. I mean, why would you fight over them? To me, I look at the big things. Those little things you concede. Does that make sense? Fight over them. And I think the chairperson have been very even-handed. We are come to important matters that will fundamentally affect each side interests. I think she has tried to be as balanced as she could be in this difficult situation. But there are certain kinds of, and the PP is good as raising a lot of issues that are not significantly important, but it have a propaganda value for them. Because if you raise 10 insignificant things and you win on it, you look good. You understand? You look good. And in a way, you're white mailing the GCOM because GCOM look like if they conceded to you, or more they conceded to the other side. But in real terms, you got to look at where, when it comes to the critical issues that matters more, how GCOM deals with it. If PP argue, you should get more low, more the press to come in. Why GCOM should fight over them? If the press are uncomfortable and they go to the people and say, look, we're uncomfortable, you need a chair on the table. And they raise it with GCOM got right to say, yeah, get them the chair on the table. So you have to look and see where, when it comes to the critical matters, how the GCOM behave,
All right, it's been a pleasure again having you on the program. We've dealt with some fundamental issues, and I do hope that the viewers out there will continue to be in tune so that we can continue to have these discussions on where our country is going, and that at the end of it all, that we find ourselves in a position that is going to take Guyana forward and not backwards. But I hope that you have a blessed night and continue to think about Guyana as a whole and not in any partisan way. Look at the bigger picture, because if we fight and we kill ourselves, each other, then eventually it's going to take us back, way back, and we don't really want to go down that road. But it's been a pleasure having you, Brother Ogun, and I look forward to us continuing these discussions.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Do have a good night. See you next week, possibly same time, same channel, for another program of Walter Rodney Groundings.
I think we had a good program. In fact, we go deeper into some issues that really